Adrift in the abyss. The emergency pod's lighting flickered for the third time in as many hours. Mavis Talaverin pressed her four-fingered hand against the viewport, the cold surface fogging briefly from her touch. Outside, the endless void of space stretched in every direction, beautiful and terrifying in its emptiness. Life support at 38% capacity, announced the pod's AI in the melodic Celeran language. Estimated time remaining: 16 hours, 42 minutes. Mavis closed her inner eyelids, leaving only her outer pair open to observe the stars. Her violet skin had taken on a paler hue from the stress and dehydration. The wound on her side had mostly sealed thanks to the pod's basic medical system, but the pain remained a constant companion. "Display distress signal status," she commanded, her voice raspy. "Distress signal active on all standard frequencies. No response detected." Of course there was no response. She was drifting through a largely unpatrolled sector, a region most civilized species avoided. Most civilized species except humans. Humans. The word alone sent a ripple of unease through Mavis's slender frame. She had never encountered one personally, but every Celeran knew the stories. Bipedal mammals from a death world evolved as pursuit predators with endurance that defied logic. Their respiratory system was so efficient they could literally chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. Their bodies could repair broken bones and regenerate damaged tissue. They could survive extreme temperature fluctuations that would kill most sentient species. And they were everywhere now, expanding across the galaxy with alarming speed. This sector, the Orion Spur, was largely under their control. If anyone responded to her distress call, it would likely be them. Better to die here in the void than face those monsters, some part of her whispered. But another part, the survivor, wasn't so sure. Mavis turned away from the viewport and accessed the pod's memory core, bringing up the final moments aboard the research vessel Celestial Seeker. The images played across the small display. Captain Norvek's face contorted with panic, Science Officer Tellis shouting about containment breach, and Navigator Pelfer, her direct superior, looking at her with cold calculation before triggering the emergency ejection of her station. "You're compromised, Mavis," he had said, not unkindly. "The mission cannot be." Then the explosive bolts had fired, sending her navigation pod, designed to function as an emergency escape vehicle, hurtling away from the Celestial Seeker. She remembered screaming, the pod tumbling through space, her body slamming against the restraints as the stabilizers struggled to engage. By the time she regained control, the Celestial Seeker was already engaging its jump drive, vanishing into faster-than-light travel and leaving her behind. Left to die. Abandoned. The official mission had been to catalog spatial anomalies along the fringes of the Gliese 832 system. But Mavis had suspected from the beginning there was more to it. The unusual security protocols, the specialized equipment that didn't match their stated objectives, the nervous tension among the senior officers. Something had gone terribly wrong, and instead of evacuating everyone, they had chosen to eliminate the witnesses. Or at least one witness, her. She had been unconscious for nearly 10 hours after the ejection, her body struggling with the trauma of sudden decompression in parts of the pod and the wound she'd sustained when a control panel exploded during the violent separation. By the time she awoke, the damage to the life support system was already critical. Life support at 37%. The AI updated. Estimated time remaining: 16 hours, 20 minutes. Mavis checked the navigational system again. The pod's limited propulsion had pushed her deeper into the uncharted region, but its fuel was nearly depleted. Her trajectory would take her nowhere near any known worlds or stations within the life support window. She was going to die here. Mavis reached into her pocket and pulled out a small holographic projector, her most treasured possession. It activated with a touch, displaying a three-dimensional image of her family unit. her primary parent with characteristic violet skin stretching upward in the traditional greeting, her secondary parent with their more iridescent blue tones signing affection, and her sibling unit still in adolescent molt, patches of their skin transitioning from juvenile green to adult coloration. She would never see them again. A sob escaped her, the first since she'd awakened in the pod. She had maintained her composure, her training, focusing on survival rather than emotion. But now, facing the inevitability of her situation, the dam broke. Her shoulders shook as she keened, the sullen expression of grief echoing within the confines of the pod. The moment stretched, and then, with a deep breath, she regained control. Crying would only waste precious oxygen and water. She had to think. The pod's systems were failing, but perhaps there was something she could salvage, some way to extend her survival window. She began a systematic inventory of everything available to her. 6 hours later, Mavis had dismantled parts of the non-essential systems, rerouting power to life support. She gained perhaps 4 more hours of survival time, but it was a temporary measure at best. Unidentified energy signature detected, the AI suddenly announced. Range, approximately 12,000 kilometers and closing. Mavis froze, her hands deep in the circuitry of the communications array she'd been cannibalizing. Identify. Unable to match energy profile to known database entries. Engine signature suggests artificial propulsion. A ship. Someone had found her. Hope and dread battled within her chest as she scrambled to the viewport, straining to see into the darkness. At first, there was nothing but stars. Then she saw it, a moving point of light, steadily growing larger. Magnify, she ordered, and the viewport's built-in enhancement activated. The approaching vessel took shape, angular, utilitarian, with none of the flowing organic design of Celeran ships. It was roughly cylindrical with extending structures that might be weapon mounts or sensor arrays. The hull was dark, absorbing rather than reflecting light, with minimal illumination showing through small viewports. As it drew closer, Mavis could make out markings on the hull. Unfamiliar script, blocky and efficient, not Celeran, not any of the major coalition species. Her heart rate doubled as recognition dawned. Those were human letters. Incoming transmission, the AI announced. Unknown language. Attempting translation. Static filled the pod. Then a voice. Clear, deep, confident. The translation overlay struggled for a moment before rendering the words in Celeran. Unidentified vessel. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth Frontier Survey ship Dauntless. We've detected your distress signal and are moving to assist. Please respond with your status and requirements. A human ship. Humans were coming for her. Mavis's hand hovered over the communications control. Every story she'd ever heard warned her not to trust humans. They were deceptive, dangerous, unpredictable. But the alternative was certain death. Life support at 29%. The AI reminded her. Estimated time remaining. 14 hours, 6 minutes. With a trembling hand, Mavis activated the transmitter. This is Navigator Mavis Talverin of the Celeran science vessel Celestial Seeker, she said, choosing her words carefully. I am alone in an emergency pod with failing life support. My vessel departed without me during a mission complication. There was a brief pause before the response came. Navigator Talverin, we're registering severe damage to your pod systems. Prepare for emergency retrieval. We'll have you aboard within 30 minutes. Mavis swallowed hard, looking around at the pod that had been both her prison and her sanctuary for the past day. Soon she would be face to face with the species her people feared above all others. I acknowledge, she transmitted finally, standing by for retrieval. The human vessel grew larger on her viewport, its dark hull now blocking out the stars. Magnetic grapples extended from its underside, reaching for her pod. As the clamps secured themselves to her pod's exterior with heavy metallic thuds, Mavis gathered what few possessions she could carry. Her family hologram, her navigator's insignia, the small ceremonial knife all Celerans carried as a symbol of their self-determination. The knife felt particularly significant now. If the humans proved to be the monsters her people believed them to be, she would at least have the means to choose her own ending. The pod shuddered as it was drawn into the larger ship's hangar bay. Through the viewport, Mavis could see figures moving, bipedal, encased in bulky environmental suits, humans preparing to bring her inside. "May the celestial currents guide me," she whispered, the traditional Celeran prayer for those facing unknown journeys. The exterior pressure equalized, and the pod systems registered the presence of a breathable atmosphere outside. A heavy metallic clang reverberated through the hull as docking clamps secured the pod. "Stand by for extraction," came a new voice over the comm system, different from the captain's, deeper but somehow gentler. Mavis took one final look at her family's image, then steeled herself for whatever was to come. The outer hatch of her pod began to cycle open, bright lights spilling in from the human ship beyond. She was about to meet humanity face to face. Unexpected salvation. The hatch completed its opening cycle with a hydraulic hiss, flooding Mavis's pod with the sterile, recycled air of the human vessel. Two figures stood silhouetted against the harsh hangar lights, humanoid shapes encased in what appeared to be emergency response suits rather than full environmental protection. Their faces were visible behind transparent visors, and Mavis got her first close look at humans. They were unsettlingly similar to Celerans, yet profoundly different. No violet or blue skin tones, but various shades of tan and brown. No four-fingered hands, but five-digited appendages. No inner eyelids, just single-layer ones that blinked periodically. Their facial features were flatter, more compressed than those of her species. Navigator Talverin. The taller one spoke, the voice matching the one she'd heard over the comm. "I'm Chief Medical Officer Alejandro Reyes. This is Security Officer Tamir Kapoor. We're here to help you." Mavis gripped her ceremonial knife tighter in her pocket, but kept her posture non-threatening. "I require medical assistance and life support," she managed to say, the translation device on her collar converting her words to the human language. "We can see that," the one called Reyes said, his eyes, a striking amber color, scanning her professionally. "You've got a significant injury to your lateral thorax, and you're showing signs of dehydration and exposure. May we approach?" The caution surprised her. In the stories, humans simply took what they wanted. "You may," she permitted, tensing nonetheless as they entered the pod. The medical officer moved with careful precision, a small device in his hand scanning her body from head to toe. Multiple lacerations, moderate internal bleeding that's been partially addressed by your pod's medical system, dehydration, and early-stage hypoxia from oxygen deprivation, he reported, seemingly to both her and his companion. "Nothing immediately life-threatening, but we need to get you to medical." The security officer, Kapoor, maintained a respectful distance. "Can you walk, Navigator, or would you prefer a transport?" Again, the deference surprised her. Where was the aggression, the domination her people associated with humans? "I can walk," she asserted, though she wasn't entirely certain. Pride demanded she not show weakness. When she attempted to stand, however, her legs buckled immediately. The medical officer moved with startling speed, catching her before she hit the deck. His strength was alarming. He supported her weight effortlessly with just one arm. "Transport it is," he said, not unkindly. "Tamer, get the hover stretcher." Minutes later, Mavis found herself being guided through the corridors of the Dauntless, prone on a floating platform that responded to the security officer's subtle gestures. Crew members they passed looked at her with undisguised curiosity, but none approached or spoke. The medical bay was stark and efficient, dominated by equipment she didn't recognize. Dr. Reyes transferred her to an examination table that immediately began scanning her biology. "Your physiology is similar enough to several species in our database that treatment should be straightforward," he explained, studying the readouts. I'm going to administer fluids, oxygen, and a broad-spectrum regenerative compound that should accelerate your healing without adverse effects. Mavis watched warily as he prepared various medical implements. You seem familiar with treating non-humans. Reyes smiled, a facial expression Celerans shared, though the musculature was different. About 30% of our crew complement is non-human, Navigator. The Frontier Survey accepts qualified personnel from all coalition species. This contradicted everything she knew about humans. I was told humans preferred isolation, that you distrusted other species. The doctor paused, seeming to consider his words carefully. That might have been true in the early days after first contact. Humanity was cautious. But that was almost 70 years ago. Times change. Before she could process this, the door to the medical bay slid open, and a new human entered. Even without insignia, Mavis would have recognized authority in the way this human carried herself. Straight-backed, confident, eyes that missed nothing. Captain Vasquez, Dr. Rice acknowledged. Doctor, the captain nodded, then turned her attention to Mavis. Navigator Talverin, welcome aboard the Dauntless. I'm glad we found you in time. Mavis attempted to sit straighter, a gesture of respect that sent pain lancing through her side. I thank you for your intervention, Captain. You mentioned your ship departed without you during a mission complication, Vasquez said, her tone neutral but her eyes sharp. That's an unusual way to describe abandoning a crew member in space. Mavis felt her double pulse quicken. How much should she reveal? It is complicated, Captain. I imagine it is, Vasquez agreed. Once Dr. Rice has you stabilized, I'd appreciate a full briefing. In the meantime, is there anyone we should contact about your status? Family, Celeran authorities. The question caught Mavis off guard. These humans were offering to help her contact her people. My mission was classified. I'm not certain who I'm permitted to inform. Something flashed across the captain's face. Anger, perhaps, but not directed at her. Navigator, you were left to die in space. I think protocol has already been broken. Her voice softened slightly. But we won't make any transmissions without your consent. Dr. Reyes cleared his throat. Captain, I need to begin treatment. Perhaps this conversation could continue after the Navigator has rested. Of course, Vasquez conceded. Navigator Talverin, you're under the protection of this vessel and its crew. Whatever happened out there, you're safe now. As the captain departed, Mavis found herself troubled by the sincerity in the human's voice. Safe? With humans? Everything she'd been taught screamed otherwise. Yet here she was, receiving medical care and respect, rather than exploitation or harm. Dr. Rice worked efficiently, explaining each procedure before performing it. The medications he administered brought almost immediate relief, the pain in her side diminishing to a dull ache. You should rest now, he advised, dimming the lights. Your body needs time to recover. Someone will be here when you wake. Despite her intention to remain vigilant, exhaustion overcame her, and Mavis drifted into uneasy sleep. She dreamed of the celestial seeker, of the moment everything went wrong. They had found something on that uncharted moon. Something ancient, something that shouldn't have been disturbed. She remembered the readings on her navigation console spiking, the strange energy signatures that defied analysis. Captain Norvak's face twisted with fear. It's waking up. Science Officer Tellis had said. It knows we're here. Then chaos. Systems failing. And the decision. The cold, calculated decision to cut away her navigation pod, to silence the witness. Mavis awoke with a start, her heart's pounding. A different human stood nearby. Younger, female, with skin darker than the captain's and hair cropped close to her scalp. Easy there, the human said softly. You're safe. I'm Lieutenant John, ship's science officer. Mavis took a steadying breath. How long have I been unconscious? About 6 hours, John replied. Dr. Rice says you're recovering well. The captain asked me to check if you felt ready to talk. 6 hours. The celestial seeker could be halfway across the sector by now. Yes, Mavis decided. I need to speak with your captain. 20 minutes later, freshly dressed in a human-designed medical garment adapted for her physiology, Mavis was escorted to what Lieutenant Zhang called the briefing room. Captain Vasquez waited there, along with a few other officers she hadn't met. Navigator, Vasquez greeted her. Please sit. How are you feeling? Improved. Mavis answered honestly, taking the offered seat. Your medical technology is impressive. Thank you. Navigator, I've asked my senior officers to join us because what you experienced may have security implications for this sector. The captain gestured to each person as she introduced them. You've met Lieutenant Zhang, our science officer. This is Commander Ortega, my first officer, and Major Chen, who heads our Marine contingent. Mavis noted that the humans called Chen had features distinct from the others. Eyes with different folds, facial structure slightly altered. Humans had even more phenotypic diversity than Celerans. Now, Captain Vasquez continued, I need you to tell us exactly what happened. Why would a Celeran research vessel abandon one of their own? The moment of truth. Mavis studied each face around the table, seeking any sign of deception or hostility. She found none, only professional interest and what appeared to be genuine concern. Perhaps, just perhaps, the stories were wrong. We were not conducting research, she admitted finally. At least, not the kind stated in our official mission parameters. We were mapping uncharted moons in the Gliese 832 system, but our true objective was to investigate an energy signature detected by long-range scans, a signature that matched certain theoretical patterns associated with ancient technology. Lieutenant Zhang leaned forward, her interest visibly piqued. Ancient as in pre-coalition, or are we talking about the precursors? The question surprised Mavis. The human seemed immediately familiar with the implications. The latter. Patterns consistent with what little we know of precursor energy matrices. The officers exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. Continue, Captain Vasquez prompted. We located the source on the third moon of the system's fifth planet, a structure partially buried beneath the surface. Our scans indicated it had been inactive for millennia, possibly millions of years. Mavis paused, the memory still vivid. Captain Norvac ordered a proximity investigation. Science Officer Tellis led the team that approached the structure. She closed her outer eyelids briefly, centering herself. Something happened when they attempted to collect samples. The structure activated. Energy readings spiked beyond anything our instruments could properly measure. And then, Major Chen prompted when she hesitated. Something responded. Mavis said quietly, not from the structure, but from deep space. A signal, powerful enough to be detected despite incredible distance. Science Officer Tellis said it was as if the structure had sent a wake-up call, and something had answered. Commander Ortega frowned. And your captain's response was to abandon ship. No, Mavis clarified. His response was to flee the system immediately. But there was concern about witnesses, about who might be held responsible if we had awakened something dangerous. The decision was made to eliminate certain crew members who weren't part of the core research team. They ejected your pod deliberately, Captain Vasquez stated, her voice gone cold. Left you to die to cover their tracks. Mavis nodded, a human gesture she'd learned from cultural briefings. Yes, I believe there were others, but I cannot be certain. My station was isolated from the main bridge. The captain stood, pacing the length of the table. Navigator, what you're describing could constitute a first contact scenario with a potentially hostile unknown entity. If your people accidentally activated some kind of ancient beacon, it could attract attention we don't want. Major Chen finished grimly. Attention that might threaten not just Celeran interests, but potentially all coalition species. Lieutenant Zhang was already working on a datapad. Captain, I've been analyzing the navigational data from the navigator's pod. Based on its original trajectory and drift, I can back-calculate the approximate location where the celestial seeker might have been when they ejected her. Do it, Vasquez ordered. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with here. She turned back to Mavis. Navigator, I understand your loyalty to your people, but this situation extends beyond Celeran jurisdiction. Whatever your crew awakened could threaten this entire sector. Mavis felt the weight of the decision pressing on her. Cooperating fully with humans went against everything she'd been taught. Yet these humans had saved her life, treated her with respect, and seemed genuinely concerned about the greater threat rather than simply exploiting the situation. I will assist in any way I can, she finally said. My navigational codes can help you track the celestial seeker's probable course. Captain Vasquez nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. Thank you, Navigator. Lieutenant Zhang will work with you on that. She addressed the entire group. I'll need to inform Earth Command about this development. In the meantime, set course for the Gliese 832 system. We need to investigate this structure ourselves. As the meeting adjourned, Mavis found herself walking alongside Lieutenant Zhang toward the science lab. The human glanced at her curiously. You seem surprised, Zhang observed. By us, I mean. Mavis hesitated before answering honestly. Humans have a certain reputation among my people. You are not what I expected. Zhang smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Let me guess. Violent, aggressive, unpredictable. Among other things, Mavis admitted. Well, Zhang said, you haven't seen us when we're truly threatened yet. Some of those stories probably have a grain of truth to them. Her smile turned wry. But we're not monsters, Navigator. At least, we try not to be. As they entered the science lab, Mavis couldn't help but wonder what these humans would do when confronted with whatever the celestial seeker had awakened. Perhaps then she would discover whether the stories were entirely wrong, or whether they simply hadn't revealed themselves fully yet. Either way, she was now committed to this path. For better or worse, her fate was now tied to this human ship and its crew. Hunters in the dark. The science lab aboard the Dauntless hummed with activity as Lieutenant Zhang and Mavis worked to reconstruct the probable course of the celestial seeker. Three-dimensional star charts hovered in a holographic display between them, with various trajectories highlighted in different colors. If they maintained maximum FTL velocity along this vector, Mavis explained, manipulating the display with practiced ease, they would reach the Celeran military outpost at Heliac 6 within 48 hours of departure. But you don't think that's their destination, Zhang observed, noting Mavis's hesitation. No, the Celeran navigator admitted. Captain Norvac wouldn't risk bringing whatever they discovered to a populated system. Not after what happened. She traced a different path through the star chart. This route would take them to the Corvellian Nebula. Difficult to navigate, minimal settled worlds, excellent for hiding. Zhang nodded thoughtfully. Makes sense. A good place to lie low while they figure out their next move. She tapped a control, sending the revised calculations to the ship's main navigation system. I'll update the captain. As Zhang moved to a communications terminal, Mavis studied the human science officer with growing curiosity. Over the past 10 hours working together, she'd observed behaviors that contradicted everything she'd been taught about humans. Zhang was methodical rather than impulsive, collaborative rather than domineering, and seemed genuinely interested in Mavis's insights rather than merely tolerating her presence. The captain wants to see both of us on the bridge, Zhang announced, returning from the terminal. She's received a response from Earth Command. The journey through the ship's corridors gave Mavis another opportunity to observe human behavior. Crew members they passed acknowledged Zhang with respectful nods or brief verbal greetings. Several looked at Mavis with undisguised curiosity, but none displayed the fear or hostility she would have expected from her cultural briefings. One encounter particularly stood out, a tall, broad-shouldered human with darker skin than most she'd seen so far stopped to address Zhang directly. "Lieutenant, is it true we've altered course to chase after the ship that abandoned our guest?" he asked, his deep voice carrying a different accent than the others. "That's classified, Chief," Zhang replied, though not unkindly. "But I can confirm we're investigating the incident." The large human turned to Mavis, meeting her four eyes directly. "Navigator, I'm Chief Petty Officer Washington. Engine room, I want you to know that abandoning crew is something no human vessel would ever do. It goes against everything we stand for." He tapped the insignia on his uniform. "No one gets left behind. That's our way." Before Mavis could formulate a response, the human nodded respectfully and continued on his way. "Sorry about that," Zhang said as they resumed walking. "Chief Washington is direct, but he meant what he said. His sentiment seems widely shared," Mavis observed cautiously. Zhang's expression grew serious. "It is. Humans have a long history of risking everything to save even a single life. It's part of our core values." She paused. "Is it different among the Celerans?" The question made Mavis uncomfortable. "We value the collective over the individual. The mission above the contributor." Was all Zhang said in response, but the single syllable carried volumes of judgment. They arrived at the bridge, a spacious command center with curved workstations arranged in a horseshoe pattern facing the main view screen. Captain Vasquez stood at its center, conferring with Commander Ortega over a data tablet. "Navigator, Lieutenant," Vasquez acknowledged them. "Earth Command has reviewed our findings and concurs with our assessment of the situation. We are authorized to pursue the Celestial Seeker and investigate this potential precursor site." "That's unexpected," Mavis admitted. "I would have thought your government would alert the Coalition Council first." "They will," Vasquez assured her, through appropriate diplomatic channels. "But given the time-sensitive nature of this situation, we've been authorized to act immediately under Emergency Protocol 7. Commander Ortega, a stern-faced human with gray streaking his dark hair, elaborated. "The protocol allows us to investigate immediate threats to multiple species without waiting for full Coalition consensus." Mavis suppressed a shiver. These humans moved with alarming decisiveness when they perceived a threat. Perhaps the stories weren't entirely wrong after all. "Navigator," Captain Vasquez continued, "I'd like you to work directly with our helm officer. Your knowledge of Celeran navigation techniques and the Celestial Seeker's capabilities will be invaluable in tracking them." "Of course, Captain," Mavis agreed, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Was she betraying her people by helping these humans, or was she preventing a greater catastrophe? The helm officer, a younger human named Ensign Patel, proved to be exceptionally skilled at spatial calculations. Together, they refined the pursuit course, reducing the estimated intercept time from 3 days to just under 30 hours. "Pretty impressive," Patel commented as they completed the final calculations. "I've never worked with a Celeran navigator before. Your species has a unique approach to four-dimensional plotting. It comes from our evolutionary background," Mavis explained, finding herself growing more comfortable with these casual exchanges. Celerans evolved in oceanic environments where movement occurred in 3 full dimensions rather than primarily along a single plane. "That explains a lot," Patel nodded. "Your natural intuition for volumetric movement patterns gives you an edge in space navigation." Their work was interrupted by a sudden alert from the ship's sensors. "Unknown contact," announced the tactical officer, her fingers flying across her console. "Bearing 047 Mark 12. Extreme range, but closing rapidly." "Identification," Captain Vasquez demanded, immediately alert. "Unable to match to known profiles, Captain. Energy signature is unusual." Lieutenant Zhang hurried to the science station, reviewing the incoming data. "Captain, the energy pattern bears similarities to the readings Navigator Talverin shared from the precursor site." The atmosphere on the bridge shifted instantly. What had been professional efficiency became tense readiness. "Yellow alert," Vasquez ordered. "Shield configurations to adaptive mode." "Lieutenant Zhang, full sensor sweep. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Mavis moved to Zhang's side, examining the readings with growing alarm. "This can't be coincidence," she said quietly. "Whatever the celestial seeker awakened, I think it's found us. Or it's hunting your ship and we're in the way," Zhang suggested grimly. The tactical display updated, showing the mysterious object's approach vector. It was moving with impossible speed, its trajectory bringing it directly toward their position. "Time to intercept," Vasquez asked. "At current velocity, 17 minutes, the tactical officer reported. The captain's decision was immediate. "Red alert. All hands to battle stations. Helm, adjust course to intercept vector. Let's meet this thing head-on." Alarms sounded throughout the ship as crew members rushed to secure stations and prepare defensive systems. Major Chen entered the bridge with 2 armed security officers, taking position near the tactical station. "Navigator," Captain Vasquez addressed Mavis, "you have more context for what we might be facing than anyone else on this ship. Any insights would be appreciated." Put on the spot, Mavis reviewed everything she knew about the precursor site and the events aboard the Celestial Seeker. "The structure we found appeared to be a beacon or communication device. Science Officer Tellis believed it might be designed to signal across vast distances, perhaps even between galaxies. And now something has answered," Commander Ortega said grimly. "Visual contact in 30 seconds, the tactical officer announced. The main view screen shifted, zooming in on a distant point of light that rapidly resolved into a definite shape. Mavis felt her blood run cold at the sight. The object was unlike any vessel she had ever seen, not constructed so much as grown, its surface a strange metallic organic hybrid that seemed to pulse with internal energy. It was roughly oblong, perhaps 1/3 the size of the Dauntless, with no visible propulsion systems or external features that might indicate weapons or sensors. "Fascinating," Lieutenant Zhang murmured, studying the readings. "Its hull material is actively absorbing and redirecting energy from surrounding space. I've never seen anything like it." "Is it a ship?" Major Chen asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Or something else?" Before anyone could answer, the object suddenly accelerated, closing half the remaining distance in seconds. "Evasive maneuvers," Captain Vasquez ordered. "Full power to forward shields." The Dauntless banked sharply, engines straining as they attempted to veer from the object's path. But the mysterious vessel, if that's what it was,